Você só me avisa, tá? Good morning from Brazil, everyone. My name is Daniel Moura, PhD student at the University of Brasilia, and it's a pleasure to open our current ordinary session 8, titled as Economic Development, Structural Change, and Environmental Sustainability. Today, we'll have 2 articles. The first one will be delivered by Lucas Ferraz Vasconcelos, a researcher at IPEA, and then I will deliver another article. And the dynamic of this session will be first, the researcher will present the article, and then we will read the questions by the audience on the YouTube chat box, and then the researcher will answer the questions, and then the next researcher will repeat the procedure. Okay, so I hope you enjoy this time and be comfortable to make any question you want. And I thank for our audience here at the auditorium. So let's start, and I invite Lucas Ferraz to start his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Good morning, everyone. I'm Lucas Ferraz Vasconcelos from Institute for Applied Economic Research. It's a pleasure to be here today and this morning in this exciting debate about development and growth and structural change. Well, the structure of my presentation is in 4 points. Is divided in 4 points. The first one, I will do a brief introduction to the model. Next, I will explain the model itself, some preliminary results for Brazilian economy using this model, and some conclusions about it. Well, this is a model of structural change, fundamental capabilities. I will explain which this means next, and growth. This model builds up upon an article of Professor Roderick of 2013, named The Past, Present, and Future of Economic Growth. The model aims to capture some key points, key features of longer run growth, longer run process growth observed in process of long term, and depicts a transition of sources of growth between manufacture and services and traditional sector. It's a three sector model. Well, the sectors are here. The first one is the traditional sector. It's composed by subsistence and informal sector. It's of special importance to Brazil, informal sector, to the Brazilian economy. Then this traditional sector is an important one to developing economies because it has the majority of the workforce and stagnant labor productivity. The services sector has a labor productivity that relies on developing on fundamental capabilities, which means better human capital and quality of institutions. And a manufacturing sector that is characterized by unconditional convergence. This unconditional convergence means that catch up to the technology frontier is relatively easier than the other sectors, even in the absence of fundamental capabilities, like good institutions. Well, let's explore then each of the sectors and how to model it. The first one is the services sector. This sector, the growth of the productivity in this sector depends on the productivity gap between the potential productivity in the rich countries and productivity in emerging countries. This gap conditioning the growth rate of the productivity of the country, but it's in services sector we have this theta parameter that corresponds to potential labor, which corresponds to fundamental capabilities level. Then, if a country has poor institutions, this growth of the services sector is limited. It's limited by the level of advancement of the fundamental capabilities level. Well, the institutions exhibit high complementarity, which results in a slow process of improvement. What I mean with that, investments in better education, less corruption, and so on, takes time to have an effect in economic growth, because you have a high complementarity between these institutions. Then one policy that emphasizes reforms to institutions in general, the discourse is, well, you need reform X to the economic growth, and you do this reform, and the economy keeps stagnant. Then you have to do other reform and so on. Then you get a high growth with this kind of policies. Takes a long time. This is the message. The message. Then in this model, the theta parameter that corresponds to institutions has a logistic relationship with growth. In the early stage, reforms don't have a huge effect on growth, but in the advanced economies, in which institutions are more consolidated, this has a more major effect in growth. Well, let's see the manufacturing sector. The manufacturing sector also has conditioning growth here that depends on the quality of institutions, but other parts, other channel of growth of productivity didn't depend of institutions. You can have poor institutions, and even so, you can have a good productivity growth in manufacturing sector. Then we have this specification for productivity growth in manufacturing. One part depends of the institutions or the quality of institutions, and the other don't. Just depend of the technology gap between rich countries and developing countries. Well, this is named unconditional convergence because you don't have the condition of institutions to grow. Then you can catch up to technology frontier relatively easier than in services sector. To summarize the idea of the modeling of manufacturing sector, you don't need to be rich to compete with a rich country. You can compete in manufacturing sector even if you are a poor country. This is more difficult in services sector. You need a more advanced level of institutions in high skilled labor to do that in services. Well, and as the industry approach the productive technology frontier, this gap narrows, and this source of growth eventually disappears. Then, when this happens, when this source of growth disappears, you need to found your growth process in better institutions. This is the idea here. Well, then for the economy as a whole, the labor productivity is a weighted average of manufacturing sector, services sector, a traditional sector that in this model is a residual. There is this residual. The alphas, the alpha M, alpha S, and 1 minus alpha M in alpha S are the shares employment in each sector. Well, here I just repeat the equation, the previous equation, and totally differentiating this equation, we have this specification. Then you see we reach this equation, and substituting the DYM and DYS, we reach this equation. Rearranging the previous equation, we arrive in this specification, and we divide this equation by y. We have the productivity ratio of each sector. Then this is the productivity of manufacturing sector related to the productivity of the economy as a whole. The same thing to the services sector. And if we rearrange the previous equation, we reach this final equation that has 4 channels of growth. The first channel is associated with the barrier institutions, the institutions building. The second channel is related with the unconditional growth. Then if you have a technology gap in the manufacturing sector, you can grow, even without building institutions. This is the channel of industrialization of countries. This third channel, the channel C, is the Lewis effect. You have a productivity gap between manufacture and traditional sector, and you are receiving labor in the manufacturing sector. Then this channel is huge when you're having transition of the rural to urban areas, for example, which occurs in Brazil in 60s and 70s. Then this channel was huge to Brazil in the 60s and 70s, and it's huge to China today, for example. And this final channel is modern services. Then you start to this channel fades out because you close the gap with the advanced countries. Then you need to transition to modern services and manufacturing. Then you start to grow with this channel. Then this is a very interesting specification that Roderick proposes, because you have many channels to growth, and you can growth by each channel depends on in each level of development you are. Well, I showed up to you the model of Roderick, and then I tried to apply this model to Brazilian economy. In a specific, I focused my attention in the manufacturing channel. Because I want to see what the effect of structural change we have in the growth process in Brazil in the last 2 decades. To see that, I have data from Brazilian national accounts to have the labor share of manufacturing and the productivity ratio of the manufacturing. I have this data from Brazilian national accounts. The beta, it's the speed of the convergence. I take to another Hodrick's article named Unconditional Convergence in Manufacturing. And Hodrick found an incredible stable beta in this article, and I use the baseline scenario that Hodrick's found. And to the technological gap, I use data from UNIDO, because UNIDO has a country profile, and there in the side of UNIDO, you have productivity of manufacturing sector in many countries. Then to the technological gap, I use here the productivity growth, the productivity manufacturing growth of Brazil, and to the frontier, the United States. And I found this. What was the manufacturing contribution to growth in Brazil in the last 21 years? I didn't check to the other sectors because I don't have the specification to parameters in sector in the services sector. In special, I don't have the theta, I don't have a parameter to an estimation of the parameter to good institutions. Then I focus my attention on manufacturing sector. You can see that the contribution of the manufacturing channel are decreasing over the time. The contribution is relatively small in all the series. The top of the series are 1% of growth. And nowadays, we are about 0.78 of growth derived of manufacturing sector. Then it's not a big effect of structural change in Brazil in the last decades. Well, I don't have the estimation of modern sectors, but we know that these modern sectors has a small contribution to Brazil. Then we decreased the contribution of manufacturing sectors before have a huge contribution of modern sectors. Then the pattern of small growth in Brazil in the last decades. And here I decompose that contributions between manufacturing share. We have an error here. It's manufacturing share and the tech gap, the technological gap. And you see, unfortunately, the data, we don't have the data of these points, but these points is in early 2000s, and this point is 2010. Then you see a bad evolution in the data here. You are decreasing the manufacturing share of the economy over the time, and in 2000s you keep stable around 12% of manufacturing share of the total output. And the technological gap between Brazil and United States are increasing, are spreading. Then if you have this pattern, it's not a surprise that the contribution of manufacturing sector are decreasing over time. Well, which are our conclusions of that? Brazil lost momentum in the industrial sector, while also failing to make progress in manufacturing modern services. This structural pattern leads to low economic growth. You have a bad pattern of structural change in Brazil. And the next steps of the research is modeling alpha M, the weight of the manufacturing sector in the economy, the purpose of the next steps is introduce different demand specifications to the different demand specifications causing changes in this parameter, and advance the empirical research about the other channels of that specification that I showed to you earlier. Well, that's it. Thank you. Any questions?
Can you go to that slide which had this equation, growth as a function of the speed and the gap between
This.
potential, no, the earlier one, that was right at the beginning. Yes. I'm just trying to understand this ln y star minus ln y. Doesn't ln ym star and ln ym subsumed in ln y star and ln y? Is this not part of ln y star and ln y?
Yeah, it's a share of this y. Yeah, and it's a small share of this, but yeah, we have this inside. But in order in other specifications, you can use Y star deduced of Y star on two. The idea here is that the manufacturing sector depends on the manufacturing itself, but also depends on the state of the whole economy. The gap of the whole economy between the level of development of the country and the level of the developing country.
Lucas, I have a question. But on your slide number 14, just
14?
yes, just a theoretical curiosity. The B term, right? It is the
The A
No.
term.
the B growth
the-
divided. Yes.
Mhm,
About the unconditional convergence.
mhm.
When you was reading the theoretical part that supports this model, the letter B is the term B, sorry, sensitive to technological diffusion, or this term is related to the institutions.
The beta.
No, the term as a whole. I mean, the conditional convergence is related to technological diffusion because foreign companies will send, I don't know, information and skills to the national companies. Is this related, or the focus about the diffusion is related to institutions because we are talking about research centers, universities, or technological assistance services. Just a curiosity about the theoretical basement to the.
It's both. It's both. It's about technological diffusion, but also has to do with high-skilled labor and institutions more broadly than in the article wrote by Hendrik. He draws from Hausmann, from the specification of Hausmann of institutions. That is a broad definition of institutions. Then you have both.
Okay, thank you. I am reading the YouTube chat box, but we don't have questions for a while. So if our audience wants to send a question to you until the end of the session, you may feel comfortable to do that, but I think we could finish for a while. Okay. Thank you, Lucas. It was a great presentation.
Thank you.
So I will deliver now the presentation, environmental sustainability and the economic complexity, some policy implications for a Green New Developmentalism strategy. My name is Daniel Moura. I'm a PhD student at the graduate program of economics here in the University of Brasilia. And I am bringing the following topics of our agenda. First, I will present the concept, the main argument of the article, and then I will talk with a little more details about the theoretical fundamental. The first one, environmental sustainability and ecological structural change, and then the economic complexity. And at the end, I will bring some policy implications for our Green New Developmentalism strategy. So the first part about the concept, the main argument. So the economy and the environment are systems, and they are connected, so that the relation of, about the economic growth and its impacts on the environment is not linear and stable. So the same scale of economic in terms of GDP generates a higher or lower environmental degradation depending on the composition of the production and the technologies adopted. So if depending on the technological level of the economy, so it's mandatory a condition to create and adopt environmentally friendly technologies through an ecological structural change. In short, we are talking about the greener sectors must increase their share of the GDP, and the browner, for example, needs to decrease the share. But it doesn't happen automatically, because there are some market failures and uncertainty related to the investments on technological progress. So it's recommended that a use of a policy mix that combines fiscal, industrial, trade, and regulatory policies in an eco-developmental strategy, considering all the knowledge about the structural change and the natural resource management. So considering on the main topics, the objective here is discussing some implications of that environmental policies in a eco-developmental strategy. So this figure is a simple model about the relation between the economic system and environment. So the main aspect is that the economic system extracts natural resources for using in the productive processes and consumption. There is some recycling, but all those components generates waste to the environment, and the environment so neutralizes through the ecological structures like ecosystems and natural cycles. Okay, and the intensity of the impacts about the extraction and the waste generation depends on the GDP. And here I present the relation, the GDP as how as higher is the GDP, as higher or the per capita income or the population size. Depending on the component, the nature of the impacts is different. But if we have a country with a smaller population, but a higher per capita income, the economy will generate a higher impact. Or if we have a poorer country with a lower per capita income, but a larger population, you know, the economy will generate also an impact. And the GDP here, the relation with the environmental degradation, this term is a function which the omega is the state of the technologies. So clean technologies have the effect of decreasing omega and then decreasing the environmental degradation. So the movement about decreasing the size of the omega, we could title as the ecological structural change. Sectors that adopt more environmental efficient technologies increase their share in GDP in comparison with the others. And here the figure is the same of the last slide, but highlighting the factors which changes the production, the supply side, and the demand side of the economy. So in the both sides, we have a space for public policy, and the both sides impact each other mutually. So we have a policy, for example, that changes the per capita income. We will change in the preferences about services, and that demand might change the production structure, and in the supply side, we can do the same. For example, we can establish a policy which bans some technology, so we can change. And the ecological structural change represents a dynamic vision of ecological problems and economic development, because we are talking about this dynamic process, about that relation, and at the same time we are looking at the factors from the demand side and supply side. And the positive relation to economic complexity in this case is based because productive sophistication is an essential condition for creating environmentally friendly technologies and adopt in our economy. So about the economic complexity, since the classical economists, the concern about the wealth as a result of a division of knowledge and labor or production sophistication is a present topic since that time. And today, with our capacity of producing data and processing data, we have a measure named as economic complexity, and it measures the knowledge in a society expressed by the products it makes. So here I have a kind of diagram from the economic complexity center, I guess. And each point here is a kind of product. So they are related between them, each one. So depending on the diversity of the production, you know, and the technological content, we can achieve a higher or lower score about economic complexity. So it reflects this situation, okay? The measure is based on diversity of exports that a country produces and their ubiquity, and because certain goods need similar infrastructure, institutions, and technologies and other properties. And this argument is related to that model as Lucas brought to us. And so production sophistication is necessary to create and adopt technologies to revert economic growth pathway with a higher degradation. So depending on the diversity and the complexity level, some solutions related to technology may be created from some sectors, and depending on the complexity, we can find solutions or spread solutions over the other sectors. The rationality about this argument is this. So some policy implications some policy implications for a Green New Developmentalism strategy, comprehended as that public policy mix, I said, is the investment needed are not spontaneous due to several market failures and high risks involved in this kind of investment. So the private sector can't internalize all the benefits and costs involved in the creation and diffusion of this technology, because there are some several positive technological externalities called technological spillovers. The carbon is underpriced, and this point is pretty interesting because we are in the very beginning of this discussion about how to price the carbon, because we can have a business model, for example, extensive cattle, for example, and the return of this business model is positive because the private sector is not considering the externality. So if they otherwise, they in comparison with a more sustainable model, for example, the returns could be greater. So because of this problem about the carbon pricing, the private sector can't invest in more sustainable activities. And because the carbon is a global public good, so we can produce, for example, any product with less sustainable technologies, because other countries are achieving a lower impact. So we don't have the incentive to change our economy. This is the argument. And because of that, today it is becoming more common the use of public policy mix that combine, as I said, fiscal, industrial, trade regulation policies in a developmental strategy. And the popular term is the Green New Deal packages. So when we see the Biden president of the United States talking about his program, Build Better, or the Green New Deal of the European Union, the logical is that. So because of this complexity of elements, we have a problem of policy coordination. And here I am delivering a short example about Brazil. Okay, so here this graph is about the world carbon emissions, and we can see that the major part of the carbon problem is related to the energy sector. Energy using buildings, transportation, in industry, and agriculture and forestry and land use are a smaller part. But when we'll see here the changes of forest carbon stocks, we can notice that Africa and South America are losing their stocks due to land user changing. And this situation is reflected on the Brazilian carbon emissions. When we have here the energy problem as the rest of the world in the average, but here we have a higher component related to lane change use. So it points out that different countries, different economies have different challenges about the transition. So in Brazil, we have a big problem about the land use related to agriculture and deforestation. And the situation is also reflected in the Brazilian nationally determined contribution. Our goals at the climate conference of the United Nations, and we have to reduce 37% below 2005 levels in 2025, and the half below the same year reference levels in 2030. And our strategic agenda focused on the climate neutrality is basically reducing legal deforestation, achieving a higher share of renewable energy in our energy matrix, expanding the railway network, but I stress here, restore and reforest 18 million hectares of forests until by 2030, and recover 30 million hectares of degraded pasture. So pay attention on those numbers. And here I deliver the planted area according to IBGE data about our main commercial commodities. So compare 20 million hectares is almost our entire production of corn, or recover 30 million hectares is close to our entire soybean production. So we are talking about to create a new commodity, you know. So when we think in the impact of the economy and the productive chains, we are talking about technological diffusion and education for labor and access for financial services and a proper regulation and several other incentives to the investment about that. And also the environmental policy management in Brazil is very decentralized between federal, state, and municipality levels. So the consequence of that is it's not enough that just only the federal government works well. The other spheres must do the same, and it turns more complicated, the arrangement of that mix of policies between different ministries or agencies, and among different governments level. So it reflects that problem. And we have a problem of governance because a so huge package as that involves some risk of corruption and rinsing processes. So the implications: first, the state's role is related to coordination, provide information for public management, and act as an identifier of opportunities for diversifications. Just to be more clear, the opportunities of diversifications will be can be found, for example, over the capabilities that the country can achieve. So it's not only we have a market opportunity because I don't know, now we have a different pasture technical. It's not exactly like that, but the possibilities of diversification, looking at the capabilities of the economy, and creating some institutions like councils and forums to coordinate the action between public and private sectors, establishing mechanisms for transparency and accountability. And it's pretty important to me, the strategy must have a high status in the government agenda, because we are talking about different ministries, different governmental spheres. So it's not possible to just give the package, for example, for just one ministry to take care. It needs to the higher status, maybe comprehended like the vice president, or a ministry with a higher level of capability to articulate with the others. Okay. And there are the references I used to make these presentations, and thank you. So, any question? Daniel? Lucas, tem botãozinho, só aperta uma vez, ele vai ficar verde.
Thank you for the interesting presentation, Daniel. You showed us the composition of emissions, the Brazilian emissions, right?
Yes.
But do you have the comparative levels between Brazil and other countries? Because Brazil have, yes, the composition is problematic, but the Brazilian emissions are much lower than many other countries, no?
It's a good question. I didn't separate this data for this presentation, but when we consider the whole emissions, Brazil is among the major emission countries in the world. But when we don't consider the land change use, the Brazilian economy has a pretty different feature in comparison with the world average. So it highlights even more our challenge about the land use.
It's perfect. It's because I highlight that because in your in this slide, the impression is, whoa, the energy is the big problem of Brazil, but it's not, in fact, because the clean energy share in the energy production in Brazil is very high compared to other countries.
Yes, yes. And here about energy, we are talking about energy used for buildings, transportation. So we have our transportation system is based essentially in road. So if we are talking about our problem about energy emissions, we have this challenge. It's different than China, it's different than European Union. So each country has its own challenge about emissions. So if we were talking about China, for example, their challenge is related to energy and for using industry because the carbon fossil fuels, and they are moving towards to a cleaner matrix when we see the use of air wind generation or sun generation of energy, and the same problem occurs in Europe. But here we have essentially a problem about energy in terms of share and land use change.
Just to complement the question of our friends, we have data about emission to Brazil and to other countries of the world. And we can split this data to sector. To Brazil, I think that we can split it to 68 sectors and households. So it can be done. And my question is about the model. Theoretical model splitting green sector and brown sector and recycling, it's easy test, but theoretically. But we don't have data to process, to analyze this theoretical model. So it's a good agenda focus in this kind of model, or we can change it and use data about emission, because we have data about emission, greenhouse emission to Brazil and to other countries. And we have a big series of data to this data. We have data from year 1985 to 2020. So it's a big database that we can use. So it's not a better agenda. Use this data in models.
Okay, about the first simple model is just to highlight the relation between economy and environment in terms of economics theory. This topic used to be not so clear in terms of the entire history of the economic thought. So it's just to stress, because when we'll see this kind of relation, for example, and the model approach is more close to the economic complexity when we are talking about several equilibrium points, this kind of model that is pretty different to the mainstream theory. But in relation to your suggestion about the data, I will use on my thesis those kind of data, because we can use the carbon emission as a measure of economic efficiency, as a kind of productivity. So we can use, and the models about that. There are some models pretty similar to the models that Lucas brought to us, but stressing that measure of productivity in comparison, in terms of carbon emissions. And just to illustrate, but without a quantitative model, because here my focus was on the policy implications, but we can talk, we can compare, for example, in the agriculture sector, for example, extensive livestock and a more modern livestock, for example. And without the proper incentives, we can advance our agriculture frontier over the forest, because the risk is, and you know, a more sustainable economy requires different investments in research and technological diffusion. And so without those incentives, the brown sector will keep their higher share. So the argument is that. Any more questions?
I have a question. Thank you, Daniel, for your presentation. So I have more of a theoretical question because I work at the forest sector. And I would like your thoughts on how do you think that the forest sector could advance faster towards a structural change that could help the country to achieve its international targets like those you have mentioned? And do you think that the policies that we have in place now are sufficient for that?
The forest sector as a whole is has a significant importance to the transition, because we are talking about the renewable source of material energy, and we have large areas with nature forests and plantations. So with the proper management of those areas, we can have a more sustainable source of materials in comparison, for example, with mining, you know, for construction. I don't have pictures here, but I can send about, for example, engineering wood that we can build an entire building just using wood, not cement, for example. So in terms of emissions, we can build infrastructure with less carbon. And in comparison with and considering more simple business model like agroforestry systems, and not only productions with one species, we have a pathway to advance, or even research about Brazilian native species for using. We don't have enough knowledge even today about our potation use of our native species. So there are a huge agenda to carry out in considering the forest sector. More questions? So on YouTube chat box, we don't have questions too. So I think we can finish our session. So I would like to thank anyone here to be present, the questions, Lucas for his great presentation, Daniel at Corecon for the technical support. And so we invite to stay online, to watch the other presentations and lectures. So thank you and have a great Friday. just advertisement here. We will have a small coffee break next to the seats. So everybody is invited to have a coffee break. Thank you.
Go run only to see that if there are problems with the formula. Not like there are no, it's okay. I don't know why. Go. So, like general vision. Cool. Oh, it's more. Perfect. Is another computer? No, it's the same there. Ah, is your secret. Yeah. Learn it by doing. Yeah. And also to use this? Yeah. That's not my reverse. Yeah. I have to use oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Daniel, quando estiver pronto, me avisa. I will take some pictures of you. Do not worry. Oh, my sparkling water. Thanks very much. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let us start the third day of the third international workshop of the Structuralist Development Macroeconomics. Today, we will have two keynote speakers. The first one, Giulio Guarini, in the morning, and then Luis Fernando de Paula on the afternoon. So, Giulio, please take your seat. Okay. So, as chair of sections, my duty to present my friend, Giulio Guarini. Giulio Guarini is an associate professor of economics at Tuskegee University, Viterbo, Italy. Previously, he was an economist at the Italian Agency of Territorial Cohesion and the Italian Ministry of Economic Development. He graduated in economics at La Sapienza University of Rome, where he subsequently earned his PhD in economics. He has spent periods of study in the United Kingdom at the University of Oxford and the University of Sussex. His main research interests are economic development, environmental sustainability, innovation, ecological macroeconomics, inequalities, human development. He has published in several journals, among which Oxford Development Studies, Research Policy, Ecological Economics, Structural Change and Economic Dynamics, Journal of Post-Keynesian Economics, PSEL Quarterly Review. He is a member of the scientific editorial board of Moneta y Credito and Minerva, Laboratory on Diversity and Gender Inequality at Sapienza University. He has been collaborated for several years as scientific director of research projects within the Italian National Agency for New Technologies, Energy, and Sustainable Economic Development. Well, I have presented Giulio Guadini. Giulio, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Giuseppe, and bon dia. I want to present, okay? Perfect. The title is Sustainability in a Post-Keynesian Model for an Open Economy. I want to present, firstly, the perspective about ecological classical post-Keynesian. After, two sections about ecological transition and structural change, a developmentalist analysis, at the end, institutional change and ecological structural change. My main aim is not to go in detail, but to illustrate, to present, to propose some general idea in the first section, which are the main features of a potential ecological classical post-Keynesian perspective, after some potential of research field within post-Keynesian model to face, sorry. Okay. Sorry, how many times I have? How many minutes? Okay, okay, perfect. But now, sorry. Okay. Then start with the ecological classical post-Keynesian perspective. Too many words, but it's important to, okay. Sorry, like this and like this. Perfect. Obviously, my theoretical background was from Paolo Silo Salabini, that was one of the main founder of the Sraffian Italian school. And for our Italian tradition, it's very common to consider classical and post-Keynesian together, an integration. I want only to remember that Paolo Silo Salabini came here for different seminars at the end of the 70s and at the beginning on 80s. Indeed, there are two main important books of him. The second is very important, The Forces of Economic Growth and Decline, that are translated in Portuguese. The main point of this kind of approach is that political economy is the study of economic development, and it is instrumental for civil and human development. Okay, no, okay. The first point, I think, no. Okay, sorry, yes. Also, which is the vision of ecological, the meaning of ecological. I think it's important. You know, Schumpeter said that there are application, but before there are theory, but before there are vision. That is the research chain that we have to debate about vision. And the vision could be, for me, the integral ecology that was promoted by Pope Francis. That the idea is to combine social justice with environmental caring to promote integral human development. And we can use this kind of vision. I can use this kind of vision to analyze the integration of economic, social, and environmental dimension, obviously with the aim of civil progress and human development. In other terms, environment is not a new market of environmental services. That is could be the tendency for the neoclassical economics, but is also not a new research field, but I think could be a new lens to understand the economic development process and to analyze interactions, contradictions, and opportunities across environmental, social, and economic factors. That we should have a sound current conceptual framework, but this kind of framework could be open to the novelties in terms of new topics and also to collaborate and to integrate with a specific theoretical contribution, for instance, capability approach, but also some evolutionary contributions about environmental innovation. And I think there are many space for integrate, maintaining the current conceptual framework. For instance, another point is that the exception for neoclassical economics are the rule for post-Keynesian economics. And the differences are more and more important between environmental economics, that means neoclassical economics perspective about environment, and ecological post-Keynesian economics. That is important to reconsider this aspect. Some examples, no? Constant returns versus increasing returns. You know that increasing returns come from static and dynamic returns. But for ecological point of view, this kind of difference are more and more important, because ecological static returns, you can imagine energy transition without a new infrastructure? No. On the other hand, dynamic returns, that are returns generated by learning process. But we have said in these days and in general that all kind of ecological transition entails new competence, new skill, new way to learn, and new things to learn. That in this case, there is an explosion of dynamic returns. That this is a very important condition. Another condition is about not perfect competition. Why is important this? For two main reasons. Because you can consider the Kaleskian price equation. Otherwise, it's not possible. But the Kaleskian price equation allows to consider ecological aspect within the production process, because you can put as in the original version of Kaleskian price equation the environmental efficiency or energy efficiency, because you can consider raw material and energy unit cost that Taylor say intermediate unit cost. And you can do this thanks to the not perfect competition hypothesis. But also, it's important to consider not perfect competition, because price not can represent the scarcity of natural resources. It's a very important chapter, no, about environmental economics. The idea market can manage with the natural scarcity thanks to the prices, but the assumption is that prices can generate information about scarcity only in perfect competition, and we know which is the very oligopolistic power behind the production of natural resources. That is another important assumption. This kind of assumptions are important because there are many environmental economists, or for instance, agricultural economists that study ecological transition without consider that some instruments entail some important theoretical assumption. And for instance, not perfect sustainability. That means strong sustainability. Then natural physical capital are complementary. Also complementarity between private and public investment. Otherwise impossible to address ecological challenge without this kind of idea that crowding out is not the rule, or should not be the rule. And finally, in this kind of view, we can say that externality cannot be the general vision, because externality means there is an economic system that outside provokes some negative impact, but we can consider the opposite, that if the internality of ecological topics, then we have to go within the economic development process to better understand the ecological issue. Okay, after this kind of section, I want to go to present two different studies. One with José Oreiro about ecological transition and structural change. José Luis, sorry. José Luis. Okay. Ecological transition and structural change. A developmentalist analysis. The first point we can consider that or present the ecological transition composed on two components, two elements: ecological technical progress, that means a general reduction of the environmental pressure in terms of impact, pollution intensity, for instance, and or use of natural resources, raw material intensity, ecological footprint. And because we can consider ecological issues in terms of the ecological impact of the production, but also in terms of natural resources used for the production. And the second point is the ecological structural change, no? To shift labor value added from economic activities with high environmental pressure intensity that we can call shortly brown activity to economic activity with a low environmental pressure intensity that we can call green activity. Obviously, this kind of definition are a sort of latent variable that is it clear the concept, but we can manage with this concept according to the specific topic and can change, no? Which are green activities. We can consider a wide version of this concept. All economic activities with a significant commitment for environmental sustainability in terms for processes and products related to green economy, like circular economy, or a narrow version, for instance, eco-industries. That is a definition by OECD Eurostat, no? Activities which produce goods and services to measure, prevent, limit, minimize, or correct environmental damage to water, air, soil, as well as problems related to waste, noise, and ecosystems. These include cleaner technologies, products, and services that reduce environmental risk and minimize pollution and resource use. That only in the narrow version, there are many, many things and many different sectors are involved in this, but this is the situation. Also for OECD that want to have a strict definition, but could be impossible. But this kind of definition can orient our kind of analysis. That in this case, we can consider, no, this is only analytical representation of ecological transition in a static term that we want to increase, sorry, we want to decrease a sort of environmental pressure, and that we have to decrease the environmental pressure intensity. And for this, we have to increase the weight, the percentage of activities that present a very low level of environmental pressure. This is interesting because we also want to connect this kind of definition or this kind of topic with what happened in the international policy strategies. No? In this case, we try to connect with the goal 9 of the Sustainable Development Goals. No? Build a resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation. Two specific targets, 9.2, no? Promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization by 2030. I don't know, I don't think so, but the direction is this. Significantly rise industry share of employment in line with the national circumstance, but in this direction. And also target 9.4, upgrade infrastructure and retrofit industries to make them sustainable with increased resource use efficiency and greater adoption of clean and environmental sound technologies and industrial processes, with all countries taking action in accordance with their respective capabilities. No? then the relationship between industrialization and ecological structural change can be studied within the new developmentalism framework based on structural change. This is the idea. And probably also this kind of direction could be interesting also for the developed country. That could be a channel to consider a new developmentalism in this form of ecological version, not only for the developing countries, because also in Europe we have to promote new form for ecological structural change. Then we can adopt some aspect of a new developmentalism, because this is the challenge also for us. It's important this because in general, you can say structural change means agriculture, industry, and services, but with the ecological perspective, we can also say that the biological agriculture is a new kind of ecological structural change. That change also the meaning of structural change, no? This is the technological progress function of Caldor. In this function, there is the novelty by José Luis about the manufacturing share in outputs, and we can consider in this work, which is the relationship between manufacturing share in output and the growth of environmental efficiency. This is the main idea. I don't want to present all aspects, but the idea is that this is the direction. We can consider, for instance, Dutch disease by considering the green side of Dutch disease. No, this is one of the main important equations. No, put in this industrialization equation, gamma could represent the share of manufacturing industry in GDP, GT represent technological gap, and epsilon, in this case, represent the share of green activities in GDP, and obviously Q represent the exchange rate. That in this case, we want to consider the role of environmental efficiency to industrialize or reindustrialize countries that stay in the middle income trap. We put here the square of gamma, like Raga said yesterday about the Kuznets curve. But why we can consider green activities as an important new driver of industrialization? But we can consider that green activities increase the price competitiveness of the industries by reducing the unit raw material and energy cost of production. It's very important. Italy have suffered from this kind of problem with the other European important countries because we have very high level of energy cost. And this for us, this represents a factor of our price competitiveness, comparing with other European countries, for instance, Germany. Green activities can increase the no price competitiveness of industries. Environmental sustainability of product increase the quality perceived by international consumers. There are many studies about this. Also another, my study, empirical studies, which is the impact of green activities. Could be the increase of income elasticity, then is important for the price competitiveness, because international consumers can appreciate the green efforts of the other countries. But obviously, in this case, you have to give space in the market, that you are not protectionist for this kind of new green product from developing countries. But also there are important technological advantages that can derive from green activities concerning, for instance, the complementarities between standard and green technologies, economies of scope, there are many literature in this aspect, in evolutionary literature, that we can consider in this kind of model and renew and integrate these two different analytical worlds, I think. The complementarity between standard and green technology means also that the ecological conversion comes not only because the entrepreneur decide to convert to the sustainability, but sometimes happen because he want to change the machinery, and in the market, the best technological performance machinery is with more energy efficiency that prefer this kind of a machinery. And this means also economies of scope. The other point, green activity can open the room for new resources of competitiveness and business. For instance, if you consider the ecotourism is another kind of space to consider ecological structural change, because ecotourism means not only hotel with specific infrastructure, but also food with a specific infrastructure, and so on. That could be a sort of contrast with the tourism, with the massive tourism, no? That in some cases create problem at the local level and local context. But this is also an example of externalities. Also, the share of green activities can increase demand for new goods and services, and we consider backwards and forwards linkages derived by Hirschman in a new sense. Why? Because if an enterprise decide to start with ecological conversion, need more and new kind of environmental services. For instance, we can think about the circular economies, no? But also, literature say that green innovation then can approximate, no? Green structural change, stimulate networking and open innovation process. And there are many other kind of aspects that means that green activities can drive industrialization in new form. And also is important this other point, share of green activities represent the preference for capital investment with respect of financialized speculation, because green innovation reflects a long-term strategy, no, instead of a short-term strategy of corporate financialization. That is the other channel that means more industrialization, more interest for physical investment than financial investment. Then here we consider this aspect in the case of Dutch disease. All, I think, in this room know about the problem of Dutch disease, no? And we also consider the fact that we can say something like that is represented in this graph, that environmental efficiency can entail forms of are integrated with the real exchange rate policies. Then in this case, we connect the exchange rate with epsilon that represent the green activity share. This is the graph, no, about the soil bin, the increase of the soil bin. That there is here many other aspects related to the Dutch disease and the green efficiency in terms of more higher green share of green activities. And there is also an empirical test about this kind of hypothesis, where epsilon is significant with GMM panel, obviously. And there are some empirical evidence. I want to go to the second kind of because the time run. The second, okay. No, okay, but I think we can arrive to the other kind of contribution. The other kind of contribution is about institutional change and ecological structural change. The conceptual framework, ecological transition, and political conflict. If we say that ecological transition is based on ecological structural change, we also can consider some concept linked with the Hirschman that said during the development, there are not only conflict in terms of profit and wage, but there is also conflict between sectors in terms of wage in different sectors, that there are different economic interests. And we can consider this fact also in terms of ecological transition, in terms of ecological structural change, that in this kind of contribution, we try to consider not the traditional political conflict between wage and profit, then capitalists and workers, but a sort of conflict between a brown coalition and a green coalition, which is the point. The assumption, but with, I think, good empirical evidence. The fact is that probably in the brown coalition, you have brown capitalists, or because here we not distinguish between rentiers or capitalists, no? Capitalists with high intensive natural resource intensity in the production, but also low skilled workers, because in the ecological activities entails more competence, more skills than probably brown and green coalition. In the green coalition, you have green capitalists, but also high skilled workers. And this is a first step to try to insert in the ecological structural change the idea of a political conflict. Okay, then we manage to illustrate the potential idea, because this idea want to elaborate in analytical terms the idea of just transition. But just transition not only means in terms of aim, goals, that social goals and environmental goals, but also in terms of the process to achieve the green goal. Without a coalition that want this kind of environmental goal, is impossible to achieve the green goal. And sometimes this depends. In this case, we have represented by conflict from labor market to the ecological structural change. In another way, we can say that the environmental sustainability should be economically sustainable. This is and politically sustainable. Okay, that the political economic issues could be how to achieve ecological structural change by building a green political coalition that can reduce the existing green technological gap, and how to avoid unskilled workers aligned with the brown capitalists to obstruct the shift to environmentally friendly practice. No, there is a big trade-off can be between employment in some sector and the green revolution. That we start by considering here a labor market in a structural market with a structural analysis. This kind of contribution is with another colleague of Tuscia University, Chiara Grazzini, and with Gabriel Porzile. And then we start with his model, and we try with him to convert this model in terms of ecological structural change. The first step is to introduce in this equation that represent with sigma the wage share target. No, there sorry, but in this case, epsilon is not the green share, the share of green activity, but is the level of employment. Okay, sorry for this, but Z represents the green technological gap that, as usual, alpha 1 represents the bargain power of trade unions, but alpha 2 probably can represent, because of Z is the green technological gap, alpha 2 probably represents the demand for high wage from the skilled workers. Because if you reduce the green technological gap, this means that you have more green workers, more skilled workers, and they won't increase their wage. This is the assumption. And this is the representation of this kind of relationship. But also we can consider the green technological gap in the external market. In this case, there is the growth rate of employment that depends on the wage share, obviously in negative term, because obviously for the price competitiveness, that if you increase wage share, you have to reduce, that you probably reduce export, that you have to reduce import by reducing employment and GDP. Simply, and the same is quite same is for beta 2. Beta 3 can be the positive impact of environmental efficiency. A reduction of green technological gap means that the country reduce the gap in terms of green technologies, but also in terms of share of green activities, and this means probably new instrument for increased international competitiveness. That in this case, if you reduce Z, you can increase employment. That in this case, obviously the idea is the balance payment constraint. And this is the graph that represents the second function, and we arrive to the equilibrium with the curve of the labor market, the curve of that internal market, the curve of epsilon equal to 0. That is the external market, and we obtain an equilibrium, but we can have different shift of the curve. The idea is that you can have a positive impact if you reduce Z, surely on sigma, then on increase of wage share. But do you know the final impact is ambiguous, the impact on employment. In this graph, we can insert, not in the red, that is the line of the maximum level of employment rates, but in green, you can insert a sort of green constraint, and it's another way to say it. And now we want to go up or down, up for social sustainability and down for green sustainability. Then probably here, because we have the two variables very sensitive to the political conflict, like sigma and epsilon, in this case, you introduce the political conflict because you suppose that you are a sort of new political target, green targets, okay? That after this kind of introduction of Z in this kind of standard political conflict with some novelty, we try to analyze, to elaborate a sort of ecological political conflict. In which way? By considering, because this is the first step, I think, some assumption. In this case, we consider the dynamic of green technological gap. the dynamic of this green technological gap is that the H0 probably represent the autonomous innovation in the case of the northern countries that increase Z. G, what represent? G could represent the green coalition that try to reduce this environmental efficiency. In which way? Firstly, what is green? What means green coalition? Obviously, does not mean green party. Otherwise, it's not possible to think about a structural change because you know the cycle, political cycle. The idea is that green coalition means a measure of a latent variable that can represent some essentials about how institutions consider important ecological transition. For instance, in some cases, some environmental issues in one period are only for left party, but after the period, you change, you want to increase the target, and some other aspect become for all parties. For instance, in Italy, circular economy doesn't not exist a right party against circular economy, okay? And so on, that you can consider green coalition a sort of common value about green that can increase across parties, that across institutions. That is the meaning of green coalition. And HG, what is? Could be the efficiency of green policies. In this case, I want to underline that this kind of HG represent the so-called Porter hypothesis that say instead of environmental economics, where regulation only means cost, in terms of, in this case, Porter hypothesis want to try to present a framework that say that if the regulation is not only standards, but is also an industrial policy in terms of technological transfer, in terms of specific incentives. In the short term, you can have costs, but you can change your business and you can open to other business opportunities integrated with the green targets. This means that Porter hypothesis assume that at the end, a good regulation policy can create innovation, and after can create new form of competitiveness. Okay, this is the meaning of HG, and obviously HZ represents the standard technological spillover. In this case, ecological, eco-technological spillover that we said before can be more and more impressive, more and more high than standard technological spillover, because ecological technology are more complex. Okay, in this case, there are some important, sorry, okay. This is the other, the growth rate of political power of green coalition. No, G is the growth rate of green coalitions, and which are the factors that can influence this political dynamic. J0, exogenous factors. About this, we can call also after, but because the time run. The idea is that without an external pressure in terms of international institution is quite impossible. This could be the final result to have to overcome the internal political conflict. Green coalition need for some external pressure, like international cooperation, environmental agreement. Indeed, if you consider the sustainable development goals, one of these is about partnership and international cooperation. Without partnership, it's impossible to achieve all other goals, and in particular way the sustainable goals, sustainable green goals. And JG, what represent? Okay, this could be interesting because Davila Fernandez and Sordi present many articles about the increase in awareness of the need to start the ecological transition. And they said that this also with the environmental empirical evidence that they said that could rise the green technological investment, simulating the green individual attitude and the burning power of green coalitions. That there is a sort of increasing returns in terms of green attitude among population. But this is one part of the story. The other part of the story is that there are political barriers that tend to reduce the pace of the green coalition. And probably the final result is that minus JG, because if we continue to speak about the ecological transition, because there is sort of a political decreasing returns, that are some political barriers that they cannot overcome only with the increase of green attitude of the people. The other element, the other factor is Z, and JZ can represent the ability of the brown coalition to transform its economic power in political power. And in this case, they can reduce the dynamic of green coalition. And the time. Okay. There are some, we consider the results, the solution of this kind of new system and apply this solution in the first model to obtain also in which way Z can influence the epsilon and the sigma. The main result, or one of the main, and obviously in this case you can consider, sorry, like this, no? You have sigma, you have epsilon at wage share, employment rate, but at the same time you can have brown targets or green target that you can mix this combination and try to elaborate different strategy. But the point is that J0 is a very important powerful instrument to obtain target for sort of green and red coalition, that to obtain an increase of wage share, employment rate, but at the same time an increase of environmental efficiency. But the main condition is that the effect of the environmental efficiency, that the reduction of green technological gap on international competitiveness should be higher than the influence of environmental innovation in the increasing of a wage share. That the main idea, and I finish with this part, and I finish with two sentences, is that in this case there is political conflict, but remain two important elements, no? A sort of exogenous international cooperation that help green coalition to grow up, and at the same time an international technological cooperation in terms of and trade international cooperation to give the possibility to sell and to to give to the developing country a sort of a new green brand, not all the brand about beans, soybean, for instance. Okay, that also this kind of element are very political element, but probably in this case is could be a good integration between international political interest and national political interest. And here there is there are some empirical tests about the growth rate of green technological gap and the growth rate of the green coalition. But the point is that how we can measure green coalition, obviously, I repeat that is a latent variable that, but for instance, it is very interesting, this kind of index, environmental stringency policy index, that is an index of OECD that measure the evaluate the stringency of the different political instruments for ecological transition. And we can assume that if you have high environmental stringency policy, probably means that behind you have a high green coalition, okay? In terms of sensitivity, green sensitivity of the government, but also the institutions that apply the rule. And okay, in this case, there are many estimation. I only want to finish with this sentence that could be funny. Come back to the future. This is a sentence of William Petty that probably was the first classical economy. And he said that here we are to remember that labor is the father and active principle of wealth, as lands are the mother. As I think is very powerful sentence to remember that we have to restart to think about economics, because you know the history of the production function is that it started with only two factors that are labor and land. After become labor, land, and capital, but after land disappeared in production function. That the idea is to come back to the first original, obviously with key, but key cannot be the most important factor. Okay, thank you. The last sentence.
Okay, well, many thanks, Giulio Guarini. But after for questions, I have some advices to do. The first is that Agav has just published a book with his friend Petri Purelai. Okay, it's called The Introduction to Economic Dynamics, Modeling, Analysis, and Simulation. This was published this year, 2023, okay, by Routledge. Unfortunately, it's not for sale because the only copy that Agav has.
You're not a businessman. Eh?
But there is, I will say again, the title, An Introduction to Economic Dynamics, Modeling, Analysis, and Simulation. Okay, it's a very good book, and I strongly recommend you to buy the book in the Amazon. Okay, well, the second advice is that, on contrary of Agav that has no book to sell, I have mine, right? Mine book, Macrodinâmica Pós-Keynesiana, Crescimento e Distribuição de Renda. For this workshop, I'm selling just 30 reais. 30 reais. So and I accept PIX, okay? 30 reais and I accept PIX. My signature is for free up to now, okay? Well, and another just a comment to Giulio Guarini, that when he spoke my name, José Oreiro, and I reply, no, José Luis. Well, why I want always to be known as José Luis Oreiro, not to José Oreiro? There are two reasons. The first reason is that there another guy exists called José Oreiro, which not as a relative of mine, unfortunately, because he's the owner of the greatest enterprise of hotels in Brazil. So she's a millionaire. So he had the Windsor hotels. We have 3 in Brasilia, the Windsor hotels, but unfortunately, he's not my relative. So That's the first reason. So not to confuse people. But the second reason is that names has meaning, as you know. José comes from Hebrew, what means God will add. And Luis come from German, that means brilliant warrior, you know? So I think that the combination of God will add and a brilliant warrior is just perfect to define my personality. You know? So,
Sorry.
so yes, do not make this mistake anymore. Okay, but so I think that we can open for questions. We have time, so please do not be shy. Luis Fernando and Gabriel.
Okay. Hello.
Funcionando.
Just thank you for your presentation. Very interesting. I will do. I would like to hear, not exactly a question, about one point that you mentioned in your paper with José Luis. Richman, the linkages, effects of Richman. And but Richman has another idea that is the imbalanced development. That's recently the CEPAL launched a new environment program that they call it Big Push. That is more related to Rosenstein-Roden. Well, I'd like to hear you, because for me, I think that this idea of Big Push is very attractive in terms of marketing. That people understand that is a set of investments, all that together to do a structural change, and with public and private investment, and so on. But I think that maybe this idea is a bit ambitious idea, that you suppose that you will be able, mainly the case because this is for Latin America, right? You are not talking about Europe, you are not talking about the United States, we are not talking about China. So we have some fiscal constraint. So I think that may be the idea of Richman, of unbalanced development, that you choose some strategic sector that have higher linkage effects to the economy, push other investments, could be more interesting than the idea of the big push. I know that this is not the focus of your paper, but I would like to hear you, because currently in Brazil, everybody talking about the big push of environments and so on. I think that we should think and reflect a bit more about this. Thank you.
Okay, send to Gabriel.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I think that it's that kind of presentation that after that you want to read the papers to know more about this. I think that I will read. But I have been working in something related using complexity index, in green goods. So actually, green goods have higher complexity index than other goods, brown goods. So what are you saying, that investing in these kind of goods are going to increase growth rate of countries? At least we have some data of that. But there is something that worries me, and I want to know what do you think about it, is still to build that kind of green goods, we need a lot of minerals, critical minerals, copper and lithium, and those minerals are in developing countries. For example, in Argentina, Chile, and Bolivia, we have lithium, copper in Argentina, Chile, and Congo, we have graphite, I don't know how to say in English. So it's still, there is going to be some kind of specialization of some countries in minerals that they have very low complexity index. And so I don't know if you have some thoughts, what kind of development strategy those countries can follow in order to try to support the green transition mining these minerals, but also trying to develop some other industries or maybe upstream, downstream, or something like that.
More questions? Yes, but the microphone.
Come with us. Come on.
Thank you, Julia. No, it's very, very fascinating. I just have two questions. One is that, one is kind of on the dynamical system that you've set up, and, this coalition coefficients that you have, JG. And what I wanted to know is, the coalitions take a lot of time. Each of them is a function of time, and they change very slowly. Or some coalitions can happen faster. So there's no time scale, right? Things change at different time scales in the model, but the model has the same time scale for everything. That's one thing I want to know. What is your thoughts and how would you change it? If you change it, what would? The second thing is, if I play a devil's advocate and say, okay, the strategy of modeling is fine, but think of this, that the green technology it's kind of predatory in terms of employment and inequality. So you can actually think of this as a predator prey model. If I were to be a devil's advocate and say, look, green technology like electric cars is, fine in Berlin or Paris, but it's digging holes in different places in the world. So expansion, it's a predatory growth in the sense that it can create clean air locally in developed countries, but it is actually creating inequality in the, or the same question, yeah.
No.
So I was thinking, while you're speaking, I was thinking this kind of predator prey dynamics is very much in this model, which I want to know whether you could explore or you could, think about that kind of a modeling strategy. It's purely devil's advocate position from a counter theoretical point. Thank you.
Yes, Filippi, Senator Filippi.
I have a simple question. If Brazil adopt green policies and the rest of the world don't adopt green policies, probably the price in Brazil will increase. So we lost competitivity. So I want to model this. I want to create a stock flow model to capture this effect. So do you think that it's possible? And I can use data from IoT tables, input-output tables, to create this model. This data is, I can trust in this data. What do you think about this?
Okay, let's this first round of questions. Giulio.
Okay, thank you for your interesting questions. The first about Ishman is a very good point. This, I don't know, my idea could be that because of the complexity of the green technology, probably green technology also entail the complexity of linkages in terms of backward and forward linkages. Then probably we can say that at the initial, because if you consider the idea of Ishman, no, that there are sectors that interact, no, but not all. We can consider also, for instance, private sector and public sector that interact. But the idea is, which is the first let's start. Because we know about interaction, but in this case, it's fundamental have a specific first actor. Then could be, I think, interesting to have a sort of big push to start, and after to try to use big push to show which are potential linkages, green linkages, backward and forward. Is another way to say that in the case of ecological transition, one role for the public institution is to transfer knowledge about the green technologies, because the main point is that entrepreneur that produce bottle is a very expert in bottle, but with nothing to know about which are the sustainability of bottle in terms of plastic. That in this case, I think could be essential, the role of the combination between, for instance, university and enterprises. That in this case, I think big push also to create the minimum level of infrastructure, but also to stress forms of networks. And when this kind of role was effective, then start this kind of networks for green innovation that could be start the linkage, Irishman linkages. But I don't think that, I think this can be the order for me. Integrate, but by big push and after the field for linkages. Otherwise, I think it's too complex to generate green linkages. In another sense, not only for technology, because it's an environment for all kind of aspect, is a sort of combination of positive perspective with normative perspective. It's impossible to divide that. For the first start, the first point should be a big push to indicate the direction, I think. About complexity, I think you have reason about the green complexity, and I want to say it's like no, the increase of green complexity, and also other questions about no, the increase of green complexity in one country can mean a decrease of complexity in other countries. Perfect, right. It's very difficult to manage with this. But I think I only can say that this could be a very interesting research field, but I don't know the answer. But I think there are very room to develop in this sense, not to have always an international perspective to say that this kind of idea works or not. And this, in other terms, is similar to what say the student about no pollution. I think exists many data today about the export and import of pollution, or the share of pollution within export and import, that you can, I think it's could be very interesting to use a sort of input-output matrix about pollution, and to measure which is the sort of free rider, green free rider at the international level, that we become clean thanks to your waste. No, this is the point. And another point is about the international inequality. I think you know the term ecological debt of the North country with respect to the developing country. Probably one road could be to manage with the international public debt by considering some green project. There is a law in 2000 in Italy, because now in 2000 there was the Jubileo, no? Yeah. And then there was a campaign, international campaign, to reduce or cancel or reduce the international debt. In Italy, there was developed this law that say, and I spoke few days ago with a colleague, economist colleague, Gianni Vaggi, that was a very important development economist, that about his project in Kenya to use the bargain about public debt for producing project in green sustainability. That probably, if we consider international equality in terms of ecological debt, we can consider a idea about the management of the international public debt. This could be a channel. And obviously, all of this kind of question concern the idea of that we have to change the international division of labor or green international division of labor on the global value chain.
Well, I think we still have times for some more questions. Danielle, and okay, the microphone, please. From Danielle.
Thank you, Professor Guari, for your presentation. It's not a question exactly about the presentation, but during the questions here, we are talking about increasing of a green sector that impacts or increasing of brown sectors in other countries. I can give an example in Brazil, for example, that the agriculture exporter sector can achieve a better quality of production, but our domestic consumption is pretty dirtier than the exports. So considering that dual aspect of green and brown during economic growth or the increasing participation of green sectors, what your opinion about the carbon price framework, like carbon markets or carbon taxes? It's a little controversial because in general, we have just voluntary markets of carbon credits in the world, but with a proper regulation, I think it could have a potential to balance this process of a transition, because if a green sector increases, but it demands some materials of brown sectors, but the increase of brown sectors, their emissions, for example, will need to be compensated because the carbon price. So what's your opinion about this process and the role of the carbon pricing methods? Thank you.
To him.
I read a paper by Marco Percoco on London congestion charge, wherein they had a tax on vehicles moving to one particular area in London, the mainland. And the assessment was that once the London congestion charges were done with, the pollution, instead of going down, went up. That was London. In India, in New Delhi, they tried these odd-even transportation policy. And again, the same result. The pollution, once it was introduced at the same time, went up. So then the policy makers were trying to answer what's the reason that a certain set of vehicles, they are at home, but still the pollution is going on. So what our study has shown that what this congestion charges and this odd even transportation policy does is that it just reduces the peak level of the pollution. So if you just set up an econometric model with a dummy variable on the right side, capturing the odd even transportation policy, and if you're doing a time series, you will find that that dummy will always come out to be positive and significant, which policymakers may interpret that this odd even is in fact increasing the pollution. So one is that part, the other is the econometric modeling part. So something has to be done. Maybe you end up doing regression discontinuity design to understand that what this odd even transportation policy does is that it reduces the peak level. So you need to have a dummy, you need to have a time trend, and you have to interact with the dummy so that you can capture the polynomial effect. So larger question is that we need a new urbanization policy. You also talked in one of the slides, you alluded to wastage disposal. That's a big issue in New Delhi. In fact, around New Delhi, there have been mountains of trash. And so wastage disposal is one. And then something related to the first question, that do we need satellite towns to come around these big cities to cater to the pollution problem, congestion problem? So these are broad issues wherein we need some debate and discussion. And whether at the end, whether it is Rosenstein, Rodin, or say Hirschman, wherein Hirschman was talking about, if you do, we did district level work, and we found that unlike the neighbors, if the neighbors, the theory says if the neighbors do well, then your particular region does well. In India, if you do district level work, if your neighbors aren't doing well, then you do well. Because as Hirschman had said, that you get the factors of production from there, and then the entire process goes. So you need a larger debate on these, and then a broader question on carbon taxation. In our GTAP simulations, we have done it, and carbon taxations, we have found 1,000 simulations we have done that it doesn't, it just reduces consumption and income by a very few percentage points. So carbon taxation and trade liberalization is the way forward. So I've tried to put in so many points, but just wanted to share the issue of environmental sustainability with economic growth. Thank you.
Any more questions? No? So, Giulio.
Yes, I think the last is not a question, but is a comment that thank you so much for sharing your comment. I think there are many dummies, local dummies that we have to consider. But okay, environmental sustainability could be also change at international, national, and local level. In general, the point is that we must to have a very holistic approach. That also means that for green policies, you don't have to only speak with the Ministry of Environment, but you have to speak with the Ministry of Infrastructure, Ministry of Industry, and so on. That in terms of politics, this means that you have all institutions that should believe in the ecological transition. Otherwise, I don't think it would be the fiscal channel alone the solution, because in many examples, without some, I repeat the idea, no, some stimulation or some aid for change the process, taxes does not solve any aspect of ecological transition. Because with the ecological transition, not only we need for innovation in terms of technology, but also social innovation, because we have to change the behaviors in terms of transport. But you have to spend money to convince people to change the behavior in the case of transport, and and also institutional innovation in terms of how we can manage a sustainability project. Only with the Ministry of Environment? No, that we have to consider new procedure to set a plan, because we speak about a plan de facto, that we reintroduce the idea of some forms of public plan. And about, because also in the case, the market of capital, the idea, yes, but also in this case, the idea is that you can exchange the level of pollution, but the idea, yeah.
Other questions from our colleagues were about a green sector improving in a country, generating yes, but what's the potential role of carbon pricing methods, markets or taxes? Because in a perfect picture, for example, all the emissions should be covered by compensations in other parts. So if it is too optimistic, or how is the potential of the carbon pricing methods to balance this growth between sectors in a transition process?
Okay, two elements. The first is that in some cases, the market mechanism failed, in the sense that you have to consider the national target, that if you can sell your share of pollution, but you can reduce you have to reduce your green emission. That in this sense, I think is a mix of normative, because target is normative, not positive elements. Not that market cannot consider this aspect. But the other point is that, for instance, the example of carbon price could be interesting, because could re-put in the center for technological relative prices can stimulate productivity. We generally speak only about the Caldor effect, but there are also effects about wage price, or in this case, price of carbon with respect to the general price, and that probably this is with environmental issues, we have to reconsider this aspect about that prices can be a role for labor productivity, not only the Caldor effect. And I forgot your point about the short and long term. Okay, in the model, the idea is that the second figure about the dynamic about the green coalition and the green technological gap is a long-term analysis. Estimation are in the medium term, but okay, we can develop more long-term empirical analysis, obviously. But in some
Ju-
cases,
Ju- Julie, may I make a comment? I think that I understand the question of Hagav is that in your dynamic model, you're assuming that the evolution of political coalitions occurs at the same speed, you know. So maybe you can make you can adopt the strategy of Taylor, you know, divide in short run and long run, you know, the political coalition that you thought can be evolute more rapidly will be the short run. So you analyze the stability, so on and so forth, you know, and then the other that takes more time, you will do a long run analysis, but taking as given another coalition that was determined in the short run is what precisely. So this
thank you for the suggestion. In this case, a sort of dynamic of the political stability. Yes, thank you so much for this. Okay, I think there are other comments. Or
did you reply?
I think, but because there are many comments that I think I answered to all of them.
Well, if there is no further questions, let us finish this keynote lecture given by Professor Giulio Guarini. It was a very brilliant one. And many thanks for having accepted our invitation to be here in the University of Brasilia.
Thank you.
Se alguém quiser comprar o livro, dá R$30. Pode falar.